Take a deep and gentle breath before you continue reading this, because what you are about to receive is not something ordinary or easy to process. This message did not arrive without going through real struggles, emotional battles, and long periods of uncertainty. It moved through moments of silence, separation, and hidden feelings that remained buried deep within someone's heart for a long time before finally reaching this exact moment. What it carries feels more meaningful now than it ever has before. Stay completely present with these words because they connect with something that exists far beneath the surface of your emotions. There is someone in your life who has been holding something inside their heart for much longer than they would ever be willing to openly admit. This has continued for a much longer time than you may have ever imagined or realized. They did not simply wake up one day and suddenly stop caring about you. They did not truly leave behind everything they once felt, even if their behavior appeared to suggest otherwise. What actually happened was much quieter, slower, and more complicated than what their actions showed from the outside. If you want this important message from your person to reach you clearly, tap like right now so this message can find the hearts that need to hear it. They buried their real emotions because, at that moment, they did not know how to handle the intensity of what they were feeling. They carefully covered those emotions and kept them hidden where nobody else could see them. They convinced themselves that staying quiet would be the easier choice, and that avoiding the situation would somehow make everything simpler. But emotions that are pushed deep inside do not completely vanish. They do not disappear just because someone refuses to acknowledge them. They remain there quietly, growing heavier with every passing day, every silent night, and every moment when the truth tries to come back to the surface. They wait patiently beneath everything until one day that emotional weight becomes impossible to ignore. And that is exactly where this message begins. It does not come from a place of complete confidence, peace, or certainty. It comes from a place of fear, anxiety, and the painful realization that maybe too much time has passed without taking action. Something inside them has changed recently. Something has moved within their thoughts and emotions in a way they cannot easily dismiss anymore. Maybe they saw something that reminded them of you and brought back memories they thought they had controlled. Maybe they unexpectedly heard your name somewhere and felt a wave of emotions return. Maybe life became quiet enough that the truth they had been avoiding finally became louder than all the distractions they used to silence it. Whatever caused this shift, it disturbed the comfort zone where they had been hiding for so long. One powerful realization suddenly reached them with undeniable force. They may actually lose you forever, and this time there may be no way to repair what has been broken. This realization did not arrive softly. It did not appear during a crowded day when they could easily distract themselves and move on. It came during the quietest moments, when there was nothing left to hide behind. It came late at night, when their thoughts became louder than everything around them. It came when they looked at their phone and saw nothing waiting for them. Other conversations started feeling empty. Other connections started feeling incomplete. The presence of other people could not replace the comfort and understanding they once found with you. When the outside world became silent, their own thoughts began asking questions they could no longer escape. They could no longer run away from the reality they had been avoiding for so long. That was the moment when they had to finally face what they had refused to accept. Nobody else carries the same place in their heart that you once held. Nobody else listens with the same patience and attention that you always gave them. Nobody else understands the things they never even had the words to explain. Nobody else made them feel accepted without demanding that they constantly prove themselves. Nobody else gave them emotional comfort while still allowing them the space to simply be who they were. And when that truth became impossible to deny, the feeling of urgency began growing stronger. But listen carefully, because this part is extremely important. This urgency is not created from love alone. It is also connected to the fear of losing something rare and meaningful. It comes from the awareness that once something valuable disappears, it cannot always be recreated or replaced. If they could speak to you right now, without their pride standing in the way, without their fears creating barriers, and without their excuses preventing honesty, they would probably admit something simple. They should have tried harder. They should have spoken sooner. They should have shown more when they had the opportunity. They believed they had unlimited time. They assumed your kindness, patience, and understanding would always remain available, no matter how long they stayed distant. They did not fully realize that silence can hurt someone deeply when it continues for too long. They are beginning to understand now that choosing not to act is still a decision, and every decision creates consequences. Their choice to remain distant created a space between you that became harder and harder to cross. They carry regret for not being there when their presence mattered the most. They carry regret for staying silent when honest communication could have changed everything. They carry regret for hiding their true feelings when vulnerability was the one thing that could have created a different outcome. At that time, creating distance felt safer for them. Avoiding difficult conversations seemed easier than confronting uncomfortable emotions. Silence gave them the illusion that they were protecting themselves, but avoiding pain never truly removes it. It only delays it and allows it to become stronger over time. Comment "urgent" if you feel this message is connecting with your situation. This person is not struggling because they feel nothing. They are struggling because they feel more deeply than they know how to handle. Their emotions became overwhelming, and instead of expressing them, they chose to hide them. Opening their heart to you would have required courage. It would have meant accepting the possibility of rejection. It would have meant allowing themselves to become emotionally vulnerable. It would have forced them to face personal fears and hidden parts of themselves they were not prepared to confront. There is a powerful truth that says, when people refuse to recognize the hidden patterns inside themselves, those patterns continue controlling their choices from the background. They may believe everything happening is simply destiny, bad timing, or circumstances, when in reality, their own unresolved fears are shaping their actions. And that is exactly what happened here. Instead of listening to what their heart was truly saying, they allowed fear to guide their decisions. They allowed pride to speak louder than their emotions. They allowed silence to become the strongest message they were sending. Now those old choices have created consequences they can no longer ignore. So deeply that they fear losing that rare emotional space where they once felt truly understood, without being forced beyond their own personal boundaries too quickly. Only now are they starting to realize that not every connection can be repaired after it has been allowed to fall apart. Not every meaningful bond can simply be replaced by someone new who enters their life later. That realization follows them everywhere they go these days. It appears during the quiet moments when there is nothing left to distract them from what they have been trying to avoid. It rises when they attempt to move ahead, but cannot find stable emotional ground beneath themselves. It returns every time they compare another person to you and immediately notice a difference they cannot easily explain, dismiss, or pretend is not there. This is the reason the urgency inside them continues becoming stronger with every passing day. It is not about trying to regain control over you or manipulate the situation back into their favor. It is about finally understanding that time is no longer something they possess endlessly. They can feel a door slowly moving closer toward being completely shut. Not through a dramatic argument, not through anger, and not through some final emotional announcement. It is happening quietly, gradually, and almost invisibly in the background. That kind of silent closing can be the most powerful, because when a door closes gently inside someone's heart, it often does not reopen in the same way again. Comment heart if you believe someone has been hiding their true emotions from you and they secretly want to come forward. They want to find the right way to approach you again. They want to explain themselves honestly and completely. They want to give an apology that carries genuine responsibility instead of sounding like another excuse or empty statement. But fear continues stopping them before they even take the first step. Fear makes them question whether it is already too late for their words to have any impact. Fear tells them that maybe you no longer feel the same way you once did before everything changed between you. Fear reminds them that if they finally reveal their true feelings, they might have to face a rejection that deeply hurts them. Because of this, they remain silent and carefully hold back everything they want to say. They create messages inside their mind and then delete them before they ever send them. They imagine entire conversations that never actually happen. They replay possible outcomes again and again, searching for a perfect moment that never seems to arrive. They think about every possible reaction, every possible response, every possible result. Yet somehow, they remain standing in the exact same place. And while they continue delaying, the emotional pressure inside them keeps increasing without any real way to escape. This is not a promise that everything between you will suddenly become perfect. It is not a fantasy story that guarantees a beautiful ending. It is something much closer to an honest realization coming from someone who is finally facing their own emotions from a distance. They are not saying that every wound between you has already been healed. Type yes if you want me to reveal what this person is truly struggling with right now. They are not pretending that they have suddenly discovered every answer they were missing before. What they are finally beginning to accept, even if they only admit it privately to themselves, is that treating you as if you would always remain available was a mistake. They never fully understood your value until they experienced the emptiness created by your absence. They did not recognize the importance of your presence until they were forced to sit with the space where you once existed. And when truth arrives this late, it often brings a painful weight with it, because it arrives together with the realization that something precious may have already slipped away. But what this means for you is far more important than what it means for them. Listen carefully to this part. This is not a message telling you to stop your life and wait for them. It is not asking you to forgive before your heart is genuinely ready. It is not encouraging you to return to the same painful patterns you already experienced. It is simply revealing the truth they failed to communicate through their previous choices and actions. You mattered to them much more than they ever knew how to express. Your absence now feels stronger and louder than your presence ever did when you were standing beside them. What you shared was real, even if they did not handle it with the care and awareness it deserved at that time. The real strength in this situation belongs completely to the decision you choose to make moving forward. True strength does not run back simply because someone else has suddenly become afraid of losing access to you. Someone feeling desperate does not always mean they are prepared to create the healthy relationship you deserve. A person can experience intense emotions and still not have the ability to love someone with the consistency, maturity, and stability that a meaningful connection requires. Right now, this person is facing the honest consequences of the choices they made when your presence mattered most. Consequences have a way of revealing the truth. They remove the comforting stories people create to protect themselves. They break through the excuses people repeat when they do not want to face reality. They show clearly what silence, distance, and avoidance eventually cost. Now they are revisiting old memories they once considered insignificant. They are seeing those moments through the perspective of loss, rather than the confidence of having you always nearby. They remember the small things you did naturally, without expecting anything in return. They remember how you checked on them simply because you cared. They remember how you noticed changes in their mood before they even spoke. They remember how you stayed emotionally strong even when they created distance. They remember how you searched for understanding instead of immediately choosing anger or blame. These memories affect them now because they reveal something difficult to accept. You reached a depth within them that they had not yet learned how to reach within themselves. They avoided the emotional growth and responsibility that comes with a truly meaningful connection. For a long time, they believed distance was a place where they could feel safe. But now that same distance feels less like protection and more like a place where they are forced to face themselves. They feel your presence even through the silence that exists between you. Your silence has changed. It no longer feels like a temporary pause waiting to end. Where it once felt like a small separation, it now feels like a real emotional gap becoming wider. Where it once seemed temporary, it now feels like something that could continue for an unknown amount of time. And that difference creates a fear inside them that they cannot ignore anymore. They can sense that you are no longer creating your entire emotional world around their uncertainty, their hesitation, or their mixed signals. They can feel that you are no longer standing in the same place, waiting for them to finally understand what you already knew. This creates a deeper fear inside them. Not only the fear that you may reject them if they return, but also the fear that they may no longer have the same meaningful position in your life. They worry that you may have quietly moved on and closed that chapter without needing anger, conflict, or a dramatic ending. And that calmness from someone who was once always available can feel frightening to someone who became comfortable receiving that availability without truly valuing it. They are beginning to understand something else as well. You never expected them to be flawless. You never demanded perfection. You only wanted them to genuinely show up when it mattered most. Share this video if you have recently felt a change in someone's energy toward you. You were never asking for endless emotional intensity. You were asking for reliability and consistency. You were not asking them to become someone completely different. You were asking them to become aligned with the person they claimed they wanted to be. Now they can see clearly how many times they chose comfort when courage was required. They convinced themselves again and again that they were not ready. They created reasons for their silence and explanations for their distance. They convinced themselves that the timing was never right. But readiness does not simply appear when everything becomes easy. Readiness is a decision someone chooses to make. When you are offering honesty, love, and genuine presence, they chose not to fully meet you there. That realization hurts because the opportunity no longer feels exactly the same. They can feel the difference in you now. They notice it in your voice, in your energy, and in the way you respond. They see it in the fact that you no longer spend your time proving your worth to someone who should have recognized it from the beginning. It exists in the quiet confidence that has replaced all the chasing and reaching that happened before. That inner shift completely changes the atmosphere surrounding the entire situation. They once believed they had endless time because you were always patient, understanding, and gentle with them. They mistook your patience for a guarantee that you would always remain available whenever they wanted. They viewed your kindness as a promise that you would continue waiting according to their timing. They forgot that even the most patient heart has boundaries, and eventually, self-respect begins to rise after being ignored for too long. Now they find themselves trapped in a difficult emotional battle within themselves. A part of them wants to move closer to you, but another part fears beginning something they may not be able to maintain properly. They want to come forward with a sincere apology, yet they worry about making commitments they might fail to honor consistently. They miss the connection you shared, but they also recognize the responsibility and steady effort required to rebuild it with genuine care. So they remain caught between desire and hesitation, between wanting to return and falling back into the same patterns that kept them distant before. This is why their energy feels uncertain, unstable, and restless lately. Their emotions pull them toward you, while their actions continue showing hesitation. They imagine having the courage to finally take that step. They imagine finding the perfect words that could explain everything. They imagine becoming the person they should have been from the beginning. But imagining change is easy when compared to actually living it. Real transformation requires consistent effort, repeated actions, and dedication over time. This is exactly where their fear becomes strongest, because somewhere deep inside, they understand that words by themselves are no longer enough. You are no longer someone who can be convinced simply by promises or emotional statements. You are paying attention to what is genuine, what is consistent, and what continues to appear through actions. This does not mean your feelings or care completely disappeared. It means you quietly became stronger. You allowed yourself to experience the sadness instead of escaping from it. You faced the disappointment honestly. You allowed the truth to reveal itself rather than continuing to ignore what was happening. They are only now starting to walk through that same process, and the timing of this realization matters. Learning through losing someone feels completely different from changing while that person is still safely there. They understand this, even if they cannot fully express it. They know that even if they return now, the relationship cannot simply become exactly what it once was. That realization scares them because what they miss the most is the version of you who trusted them completely and loved without holding anything back. But trust does not automatically return because someone finally chooses the right words. Once trust is damaged, it changes the entire foundation of the connection. It transforms the way two people see each other. So now they stand at a crossroads. Behind them is the familiar comfort of avoiding difficult conversations and hiding behind old habits. Ahead of them is the uncertainty of being completely honest and vulnerable without their usual defenses. If they remain where they are, they risk losing you permanently. If they step forward, they must finally confront the parts of themselves they avoided for a very long time. What you have been feeling is not just random confusion without meaning. It represents a deeper emotional shift taking place beneath the surface. A quiet truth has been developing slowly. Loss does not always arrive with dramatic moments or obvious signs. Sometimes it enters softly. Sometimes it appears through emotional distance. Sometimes it reveals itself through a subtle change in someone's presence that cannot easily be explained. They feel that change now when they think about reaching out to you. They feel it when they imagine you continuing your life with peace, confidence, and emotional clarity instead of anger or resentment. That picture unsettles them because they cannot control it anymore. They cannot simply use charm to avoid it, and they cannot distract themselves forever. For the first time, they are facing what their own fear has truly cost them. For so long, they resisted their feelings. They resisted the responsibility of showing up fully. They pushed away vulnerability, openness, and emotional honesty. But now that resistance has turned into pressure within them, and there is nowhere left for it to hide. They are not only afraid of losing you, they are also afraid of what losing you reveals about themselves. Deep down, they realize this was never only about circumstances or bad timing. It was about fear. Fear of being truly seen. Fear of not being enough. Fear of failing when something meaningful was placed in their hands. Fear of not knowing how to protect something real without damaging it. They continue replaying the moments when they could have spoken, but chose silence instead. Those moments seemed insignificant at the time, but now they carry a much heavier meaning. You did not suddenly walk away from the connection. Instead, you slowly adapted to what they consistently showed you. You stopped carrying all the emotional responsibility alone. You stopped trying to fill every empty space with hope. You stopped sacrificing your own peace just to keep something alive. That transformation happened quietly, without announcements or dramatic endings. But they see it now. They notice you no longer depend on them in the same way. They notice their actions no longer have the same power over your emotions and decisions. And what affects them the most is your new sense of calm. Because calm can feel more final than anger. Anger still shows attachment. Anger still shows someone is fighting for something. But calm shows acceptance. Calm shows that someone has reached a place where they no longer need another person to change in order to feel whole. They are familiar with confusion, mixed signals, and emotional uncertainty. But they do not know how to handle someone who has become clear, grounded, and emotionally steady. You are no longer waiting for someone else to choose you. You have started choosing yourself, and that changes everything. Their fear becomes more complicated because they worry that approaching you will reveal they are still not prepared. They worry they cannot become the person you deserve. They worry that you now see them more clearly than they see themselves. Standing in complete truth is difficult for someone who spent a long time protecting themselves with excuses. They want to tell you that their feelings were genuine. They want to explain why they stayed silent and how overwhelmed they felt. But they are beginning to understand that arriving late does not erase the pain that happened before. Good intentions cannot remove the experiences you went through. A simple apology cannot restore trust without genuine change, consistent effort, and actions that prove the words are real.